What's up, Penn State fans? It's BWI Live for Wednesday, January 21st. That is Thomas Frank Carr. I'm Greg Pickle from BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. Penn State and the rest of the college football world can officially advance to the 2026 offseason. Of course, you, us, and everyone else across this wonderful sport that we all love have been living the 2026 offseason for Penn State since the moment the Pinstripe Bowl ended, and certainly as soon as the transfer portal window opened up back on January 2nd. It's now January 21st. The transfer portal window is closed for everyone but players on the roster of Miami and Indiana. You may still see some guys go in today. So the portal technically closed at 12:00:01 on Saturday. Last Saturday, but there's 2 business days allowed, 48 hours, for compliance officers to put players into the portal. With the holiday back on Monday, that means those business hours and 48 hours are yesterday and today, so could see some late stragglers across the country. Certainly we'll see some Miami and Indiana guys, but Frank, the portal's mostly behind us. We're looking ahead to 2026. A lot to get to on that front today.
Yeah, and we talked about like some of the contingencies and kind of where Penn State sits yesterday on our Tuesday show. So if you want to go check out any of that information, check out here on the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel. And of course, we've had extensive coverage of the portal, hits and misses, top players on the roster that were committed, all that kind of stuff over at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. So tons of portal talk over the last 2 weeks for sure.
Yes, there's no question about that. Well, we're going to get into some of the 2026 season, but before that, I want to touch on the class of 2027. One of the nation's top current junior recruits, Kemon Spell, out of McKeesport, running back, who is tops among his position mate peers in the class of 2027, according to the Rivals industry rankings, and a top 5 player nationally, has been predicted to eventually end up at Penn State by On3 Vice President for Recruiting and Transfer Portal, Steve Wiltfong. That prediction going in this week as the 5-star gets ready to take some visits, including one to Penn State this coming weekend, Frank. So I'm pretty excited about this personally. I was talking to our Ryan Snyder about this the other day, but it was so strange that since James Franklin got fired, there has been some recruiting news, and it's been almost all bad news. And if there was good news, it was very few and far between. And so It's been strange to not only listen to the shows here on the BWI Live and YouTube channel this last couple weeks, but also our content over at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com and see, Frank, recruiting news that is not, it's not only not bad, but it also has a lot of good news for Penn State fans. And after about, from mid-October until mid-January, that was something that was very few and far between.
Yeah, and it's going to make for a great show tomorrow here on the YouTube channel. I'm just interested in how the switch has really flipped, because you were talking about good news. Well, the good news all started happening once the staff started focusing on recruiting, because they had to build their team for 2026 first. And and obviously there's been stuff. This is been going on behind the scenes, right? This didn't just pop up this week, but in general, we understood that they were going to be focusing on building the team in the portal, and the majority of their concentration was going to be in that area. And then the dead period is over. They're out on the road, and the good news starts to roll in. And just like, I don't want to say, this is going to sound like a scolding or anything, but like it's just a reminder for all of us that patience is important, because these people are human and they don't have extra time in the day. They don't get extra of the 24 hours to go out and do stuff. So we're going to get a better sense, I think, of their recruiting abilities and their recruiting priorities now, because that's what's on the table. That's where we are in the calendar. And so it's just we want instant reaction. We want instant analysis. We want to give you instant analysis. And sometimes that's just not how it works. We just don't have the information yet because it doesn't exist.
Right. And at least we can say that it does exist. Kemon Spell, former Penn State commit, top 5 recruit in the class of 2027, per the Rivals industry rankings, will be coming to Penn State. That is a fact. And again, the prediction we're starting today's show with is Steve Wiltfong of On3 and Rivals taking the prediction that Kemon Spell, or the stance rather, and making the prediction that Kemon Spell will eventually recommit to Penn State after decommitting once James Franklin left in 2025.
I believe we've talked about this here on the show, where Fitz was saying that they didn't think Penn State was going to get Kemon Spell on campus in this first month because they only had 2 weeks, and he had already other places he was planning to go. And so, like, he may go to those other places, but he's going to Penn State now, which is that first part's a huge win. Obviously, Steve putting in a pick is another bonus for them. And then I just think it's really interesting to have this conversation because we've been talking about Moneyball, right, this whole time at Penn State with, like, is it worth paying a running back? What should you prioritize in recruiting? And, like, the first big domino to fall is a running back. But there's two levels to this. First off, a need on the roster, I think, is obvious. They have a guy that we predict to be the starter in Carson Hansen, who's a redshirt senior. They lost Heike Hayes to the transfer portal. So you've got very minimal future depth. Deontay Sheffy and Quentin Martin are like the two young guys that have, a longer tail to their career. I know Peoples is also in that conversation, but Kemon Spell is a different animal than those guys. And so this comes back to the thing that I think the caveat in all of these things of, would you rather spend your money on a quarterback, a pass rusher, a receiver, or a tackle? Yeah. But special players at any position change the dynamic in football. And if you've got a special player, you feel like you've identified one and you think it's worth it, especially early in this cycle. And I also think it says stuff about Greg about their prioritizing of Pennsylvania and trying to stake an early claim and drive out the people that might think they have a better opportunity to land some of these Pennsylvania players than previously. And we'll see how all of that goes if this is the first stage in a long momentum push, but it certainly is a great way to kickstart recruiting in Pennsylvania.
It would be. There's no question about that. And that was something that Penn State fans, I think fairly, some of them anyway, had a question about was how would Matt Campbell and this staff, who when they were at Toledo did recruit some parts of Penn State, but not at the level, of Pennsylvania, but not nearly at the level that they now need to do at Penn State. How would they do? And if you can get Kemon Spell, one of the top players, not just in Pennsylvania, but in the country on campus during your first real junior day event, it's a good starting place. It's as good of a starting place as possible. January recruiting for the underclassmen is always interesting because guys are so far away from setting official visits. Some are starting to do so now. Ryan Snyder and Sean Fitz covering that for us over at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. But, so much changes in the summer that this early stuff helps lay the foundation for a recruiting win, but certainly a long way to go. And the only way you can start off on a better foot if you're Penn State would have been getting Spell on campus for a visit last weekend, which that was not going to happen with the portal wrapping up. So Penn State is, as of this moment, is on track to get him on campus the first time it possibly can to meet Matt Campbell and his staff. And again, what more could Penn State fans ask for?
The only thing they could ask for is a commitment. And if that happens, I know we've had transfer portal news. We've had breaking news with James Franklin being fired all the way back in October. It's been a busy couple months here for BlueWhiteIllustrated.com, and it's not going to stop. So just another reminder, subscribe here to the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel. It is free to do. And if you like this video, that helps us go a long way. I've been looking at some of the metrics, and with our shows, I want to say thank you to everybody because we have a bunch of new people that are watching regularly. And if you want to help us out, just like the video. When we get to 500 likes on a video, it takes us into a different stratosphere, and then the video gets pushed to other people. So you can help us out by just liking the video. Super easy, and that's our target for all of our live shows now, is if we can get 500 likes, that pushes us into the 5 digits of people that get to see this video. And that is a huge for us, and appreciate you supporting us and doing that. So thank you.
Yes. Thank you all for listening. Good morning and good afternoon to those of you listening either live or on replay later today. Willow in Wyoming, speaking of the chat, says, any intel on the role of Terry Smith in this process with Kemon Spell? I mean, you have to obviously assume he has played a big role in this, right? Not just because he is an outstanding recruiter of Western Pennsylvania, but also he's the one tie between Penn State's first recruiting process. Not the only, I shouldn't say that because Alan Semitis is still here, Jordan Hill is still here. But by and large, the lone tie between the first recruitment of Kemon Spell for Penn State and the second one, now that Matt Campbell is here. So, yeah, I mean, you have to assume that he played a credible part in getting this visit set up, keeping Penn State in the picture here, and will be a part of the equation moving forward to help close the deal if Penn State's able to do that. I don't think there's any question about that.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. Well, this is the BWI Live Show for Wednesday, January 21st. That's Thomas Frank Carr, T. Frank. I'm Greg Pickle. We're moving into the 2026 team. The Nittany Lions have been back in classes and certainly back around the Lash building since the semester started a week and change ago. But the college football season, the 2025 one, didn't end. I'm still struggling to wrap my head. I know we've talked about this at length, the calendar. But the idea that we just finished the 2026 loan transfer portal window and then had to turn around and say, oh, wait, the 2025 season, it has to end now in Miami on January 19th. It's hard to to fathom. Yes, it's just hard to fathom. But that's where we are in this sport. And until that day came, there was no early look at the top 25 rankings for the 2026 season. Now there are, T. Frank, and Penn State is featured in most of them in a roundup of 7 different media outlets, including On3. Penn State averaged out to a top 20 spot in the early, way too early, they're called, top 25 rankings. So just curious, your initial thoughts on that, T. Frank, when we first started talking about this morning, or when you first started seeing the top 25 list, the early ones pop up across the internet the last couple of days. Before you clicked on those links, I'll tell you what my opinion was here in a second, but before you clicked on those links, what did you expect?
Honestly, I didn't have a great barometer. I guess I was willing to accept anything. And I thought generally in the teens, somewhere from 17 to 19, 20, kind of where the composite ranking is. I maybe this is kind of a retroactive thing of the evidence has led me where to be, but in the low teens. I mean, they finished 7-6 despite the awful record. And I don't think any of us really know what to make of this roster because there are so many new things, and Penn State football is going to be very different than it has been in the last decade. So how do you rank that? I think people generally in college football have a lot of respect for Matt Campbell, and so that's going to give you a certain amount. I didn't think they'd be unranked, but I didn't think they were going to be on 3 ranking them. We ranked them where 13th. I felt a little
14.
high.
Yeah, 14.
14,
yeah.
That felt a little high. But other than that, I think, right there in the middle of 18, 22, somewhere in there. That generally where they finished last year in most people's minds. After I don't know where they actually finished in the top 25 because I find that stuff largely irrelevant. But I do think that it is, kind of right where they are. It makes sense to me.
Yeah, so in some media top 1 through 136 rankings, Penn State was anywhere between 40 and 50. In the final SP Plus from ESPN's Bill Connolly in 25, Penn State ended up at number 15. So, when you looked at what to expect for this 26, number one, it's an impossible task to know the ins and outs, up and downs of Penn State's roster and its new staff is challenging enough, let alone needing to have that kind of a knowledge bank for roughly 30 to 40 teams to put this top 25 list together.
They just
a really
all
challenging
scrambled
task.
up, right? So you just put them in the Yahtzee shaker and then threw everything on the table. The sorting through the transfer portal alone, let alone recruiting, is I don't know how you could have a reasonable understanding of where these teams really shake out. I mean, it's just it is you got to write these things, but this is why I don't write these things.
Yeah, so Penn State being in the 20s is probably about where I would have expected them to be, somewhere between 20 and 25. A lot of these rankings have them at number 18. On3, again, has them at number 14. And the average across the internet is number 20, with only one, The Athletic, having Penn State unranked. Stuart Mandel had them in his just missed category as the second team there, which is a fair place to put them as well, as far as I'm concerned. I'm with you. I couldn't blame anyone for having whatever stance they possibly could have on this Penn State team. I think you can see the past success at the starter ranks from what Penn State returns and what Iowa State it comes over from Iowa State and how those guys work. So I certainly, without a doubt, can see the rationale for ranking Penn State. There's just questions, obviously, with depth, and there's just questions in general about how this is going to look in the Big Ten compared to what the Iowa State guys and Matt Campbell did in the Big 12.
Yeah, and I think that there's maybe a little bit overblown in the idea of bringing over the offense from the Big 12 and the players from the Big 12. Like, how do I say this? The scheme is not a college scheme. And so it's not going to be something that is trying to take advantage of gimmicky things that you might find and weaknesses you might find in the Big 12. It's not spamming certain ideas. It is a NFL centric concept. And so when you have that, that transcends, leagues, and it transcends levels of competition as long as you have the players to execute it. And that's really the question is do they have the players to execute it at certain positions? And on the rundown, if we get to it today, but probably not, is going to be, do they have the players that are mature enough and coached up to the level that they're going to execute this kind of plan? And I don't think any of us know that. And then on the defensive side of the ball, you have a defensive coordinator that is very well regarded, Greg. This is his 4th year of being a defensive coordinator. It's not like there's a long resume, and I think Matt Campbell has intentionally targeted young coaches to bring a certain level of energy and zeal to the process. And so there's a lot of, I don't want to say volatility in a bad way, but there's a lot of volatility with it. There's I've been talking and kind of obsessing about what's the upside of some of these players? What's the upside of some of these coaches? They've got a lot of coaches that are also in a growth area of their career. And so the upward trajectory is definitely on the table, and how all of that fits together, I think is going to be the interesting thing. Of I'm curious of what's the highest rank we're going to get from them this upcoming season. Is there a world where On3 is right and they're 14th in the rankings at some point in the season?
Well, that's a good conversation that we're going to continue a little bit later in the show when we get into the breakdown of Penn State's schedule, because the big news is finally coming, folks. It's still 6 days away, but the Big Ten schedule will finally, at long last, be released next week. We're going to talk about that a little bit later in the show. Just my final thought here, T. Frank, on these top 25, just looking at the comments and people obviously calling them speculative and that they shouldn't be done this early. That's the way the football and really the sports media ecosystem works, but especially the football one is this stuff. You get a top 25 now, and you dissect it and discuss it. Then you get one after spring ball, and you do the same thing. And then you get one going into the season. And as we learned this past year, and also in years prior, maybe not to the drastic levels of Clemson and Penn State being top 5 teams that ended up playing each other in the Pinstripe Bowl on a baseball stadium, in a baseball stadium in late December. That they're not always correct, but it's just interesting to try and evaluate. And again, we'll get into this discussion a little bit more when we talk about the 2026 Penn State football schedule. But even that is some of the topics we'll get to, superlatives, if you will, in that section of the show. They're hard to pick because you're just not 100% sure what some of these teams actually look like. And same thing for Penn State. You have, I think, most fans at this point, especially have been following T. Frank's depth charts and whatnot, and Nate Bauer's portal hot board over at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com, I think you should have a pretty good idea of what the depth chart might look like, or at least just the makings of the top, the 2 deep, I think is fairly, at most positions, fairly straightforward who the candidates are. Maybe not decided, but at least who the candidates are. But until you see it in action, and, whatever the blue-white game may or may not be this year is not going to give you a great amount of insight into what it's actually going to look like come the fall. So it's a lot of guessing and speculation that's going to take place, I guess is what I'm trying to say, over the next 6 months until football returns. So we might as well start it now, T. Frank. It's never too early to do so.
And I thought about this while you were talking. For most of my adult life, I have railed against too soon season. When you're getting pumpkin spice lattes in August and you're getting decorations for Christmas in October.
Right.
But who is it harming is the question. And if you want to buy your decorations 2 months early and you're a planner, cool. This is not a harmful thing. And yes, we all get to laugh and point at people who are wrong. But in the end, it's fine. It's not the worst thing in the world that happens. It's not I've chilled out significantly on this evidence-based, we must be factually correct, because we wouldn't know until the very end, and then we could have an accurate ranking of the teams, and then then it's not really is it worth discussing, because then we already know and we move on. And this is an era in an area specifically here where we like to discuss things and weigh the pros and cons and enjoy football. So I'm trying to take a new tack towards the fact that I saw Valentine's Day decorations on January 1st. It doesn't affect me. It's fine. It's fine.
Right. I have not seen those yet, but that surprises me. I am not not ready for Valentine's Day, not ready for Easter. I am ready to get rid of this cold weather, though. I think most of you listening probably agree with me on that. It is cold out this morning, and it's not getting any better anytime soon.
It's going to get worse this weekend, right?
Yeah. Yeah, so that's why it's always a good time to hit that like and subscribe button, because you never know when we might get bored on a Friday, Saturday, or Sunday, snowed in, and pop on here and talk some Penn State football, some Penn State athletics. So like the video,
Greg,
subscribe to the channel.
If you ever are interested in doing just a random ass live show and you want to pop, I'm all for it. Like if you want to like just shoot the breeze, I like on a Saturday, yeah, absolutely.
One of these weekends, we're definitely going to do it. There's no doubt about that. We have plenty of weekends to go until the Penn State football season returns, and also plenty before the blue-white game as well. Looking forward to learning when or what that will look like. But for at least now, we're going to get into some odds for the 2026 College Football Playoff National Championship. And that, of course, is going to take us into this week's Best Bets segment from BetMGM. The pro football playoffs are here, and BetMGM is giving you 2 ways to make every snap even bigger. First up, the Odds Boost token, activated on any pro football playoffs bet, and if your pick hits, you're looking at an even bigger payout. It is as simple as that. And if you want a little extra peace of mind, grab your No Sweat token, attach it to a qualifying bet, and if things don't go your way, you'll get a stake back in bonus bets, no sweat, literally. So lock in, settle in, and get ready. BetMGM has your back every step of the playoffs, and we appreciate them having our back on this week's show, T. Frank. It looks like something's on your mind.
No, I'm just depressed thinking about the NFL playoffs. That's all.
Yeah, no, that's a fair point. I was sorry to see your Bills go out. It's been a pretty interesting NFL season so far. I have admittedly probably followed as little of it as I have in years, not only because the Eagles' offense became so frustrating for me down the stretch, but also it felt like every Sunday after James Franklin got fired, there was just a good amount of stuff going on, or preparing for stuff to be going on, that I just didn't follow the NFL quite as closely, but did watch all the playoff games last weekend. Certainly felt for you.
You reserved at least 3 hours on Sunday to watch your team, though, right? Like that was my demand, is like, because I'm in the same situation of I'm doing film study and I'm locked in here for 8 to 12 hours looking at Penn State football and trying to get ready for Monday. But like I always took the 3 hours that the Bills were playing off, and I think that's a critical mental health thing to do, right? And I hope you did the same.
I don't know. Sometimes I think working would have been better for my mental health than watching the Eagles, quite frankly, especially the last 6 or 7 weeks of the season.
That's fair.
But yeah, so at least took some time to enjoy some NFL football. So, all right, 2 of the best bets do involve the NFL playoffs, and then we're going to get back to the Penn State and the college football talk. My first one's focusing on Pats Broncos. I'm going to go under 42.5 in the first best bet of the week at BetMGM. This is pretty simple. I see 2 defenses that can make the opponent's time on the field be no fun, and Jarrett Stidham starting a quarterback for the Broncos. I don't think that is as much of an impediment to them winning as a lot of people seem to think. I don't think it helps greatly, don't get me wrong, but certainly Bo Nix was having a nice season. But if there's anyone you want to trust to get a backup ready for a quick turnaround, I think it's Sean Payton. So I have no interest in backing, if I was forced to take a pick on the spread here, I would lay them with New England. But it's not going to shock me if Denver can keep this game close and a low scoring affair. So under 42.5 for me is the pick in that game.
The only way I think it goes over is if the Patriots get a blowout, because the Broncos are going to play ball control. That first half of the Bills Broncos games was over in 15 minutes. Like the game time was the real time. They want as many 14 play drives as possible.
It was an extraordinary race between Penn State wrestling trying to beat Northwestern before that game got to halftime, and it was a good race. It was a good race. Penn State shut out Northwestern on Sunday in exactly 93 minutes start to finish, including a 10-minute halftime. So yeah, I was doing a little bit of double duty back and forth watching both, wondering which was going to get to an end point or a stoppage, as you could say. First. So anyway, Pats Broncos under 42.5. Then moving to the NFC, I have Seattle 2.5. I look at this game and I have a pretty long history, I think, of being a little bit of a Rams hater. I don't know why. There's no rhyme or reason to it. There's nothing that really. I don't know. I look at this matchup and I just think it screams Seattle by at least a field goal, if not a touchdown. So I saw that pop up on BetMGM, Sunday night, Monday morning, whenever the lines first came out. It just jumped off the page to me. So Seattle minus 2.5 in the NFC Championship game is best bet number 2. And then let's move to the college. Do you have any thoughts on that game, T. Frank? I know you follow the AFC closer than the NFC.
So funny enough, in a past lifetime, I was sort of covering the 49ers, so I have a pretty good idea of the NFC West specifically. Okay. And these teams know each other really well, obviously being in the same division, playing a lot. It's hard. Like, that's going to keep the game close, but if there's one team that's playing complete football right now, it is Seattle. And the Rams tend to have kind of slow starts. So, again, that is a benefit to Seattle in your pick, but I'm a little nervous about that one just because division rivals, it's hard to I think it's hard to have like that separation between them, even in a championship game, even if one team's playing better.
Right. Yeah, no, I'm with you. And that does make this hard. I don't like getting involved in divisional matchups typically, but if you're going to give me a choice for this segment of a divisional NFC championship game or like a college basketball game, we're always going to side with football until we run out of football picks to make. So those are our two best bets in the NFL. And then moving to college, I wanted to get into the fact that the first odds board is out for the 2026 2027. So again, I always get tripped up on how to say this. So it's the 2026 season, of course, but it will be the 2027 college football playoff next year. That game is going to be even later than this year, T. Frank. January 25, 2027 is the date and time
dumb
for next year's national title game. Your top
so that'd
five.
Be this coming weekend. That'd be this coming weekend. That's ridiculous.
That's correct. Yeah, well, no, it would be essentially next Monday. Yeah, it would be next Monday in this year's terms. Excuse me. So let's get into the odds for that. Ohio State leads the way at 6-1. Notre Dame, Oregon, and Texas are all 7-1. And then you have Indiana at 8-1 and Georgia at 9-1. So now obviously begs the question, where is Penn State in this list of odds? You have to do a little bit of scrolling. You do have to hit the show more button on BetMGM's website because Penn State's a little bit further down at 50-1 right now, behind 2026 opponents USC and Michigan. About where I expected them to check in, T. Frank, based on where they were in the early top 25s. Somewhere in that 40 to 60 range felt about right, and sitting at 50-1 is reasonable. I think someone in the chat said 100-1. Like, I don't necessarily disagree with that, but none of these websites are going to get caught the wrong way at this time of the year. They will undersell they will give you lower odds than they probably should. Because they don't want to get caught at this time of year. So 50-1 on Penn State, T. Frank, behind a number of teams, about 14, 15 different teams. And my biggest takeaway from that was that the Big Ten looks like it could very well be loaded again.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting to see how all of the politics play out over time, right, into this conversation if they expand the playoffs. I don't think they can this year at this point. I think they've missed the deadline. But, going forward, get into the dance and see what happens. That's going to be the plan for a lot of these teams.
Yeah, and that's changed the odds board, obviously. When you had a 4-team playoff, you couldn't even fathom, I don't think. I mean, you could in some years, but very few and far between, taking a team that was 50-1. But in the age of a 12-team college football playoff, they could maybe expand to 16. They still have time this year. They're running out of time, but they still have time this year. It looks unlikely to happen at this point, but I'm assuming we'll have 12 in 2026 for the 2027 playoff or college football playoff. Anyway, you can take a 50-1 shot. You can take somebody even longer than that. I think Indiana, the win it all at the start of this year, was still like 100-1 or something crazy like that. So it's doable. The one team that interests me, this is not an official best bet because I just talked about the portal and everything else, but Tennessee at 50-1, same odds as Penn State, kind of caught my eye a little bit this morning while I was checking out this odds board. So plenty of other options up at BetMGM, where you can see the latest odds for the 2027 college football playoff national title game, also college basketball, NFL, all that good stuff over at BetMGM.com.
See BetMGM.com for terms. 21 plus only. U.S. promotional offers not available in New York, Nevada, Ontario, or Puerto Rico. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. Call 1-800-NEXT-STEP in Arizona, 1-800-327-5050 in Massachusetts, 1-800-BETS-OFF in Iowa, and 1-800-981-0023 in Puerto Rico. First bet offer now for new customers only. Subject to eligibility requirements. Rewards are not withdrawable bonus bets that expire in 7 days. In partnership with Kansas Crossings Casino and Hotel.
All right. Thanks to BetMGM, as always, for sponsoring this week's and every Wednesday's BWI Live. That's Thomas Frank Carr. I'm Greg Pickle. We're rolling into the second half of this show on January 21st. Appreciate you all in the comments with us. If there's anything you want to discuss, let us know. You're our, as Steve Frank always says, co-host every week, but certainly this week we have plenty of time to dive into some other topics. And see what else is out there in the college football world. But until then, as I mentioned earlier in the show, the Big Ten is finally releasing its 2026 conference schedule. It's going to happen at 5:30 p.m. next Tuesday, which is I should really have looked this up ahead of time. I believe it's the 27th, if that sounds right to you, T.
26th, I think. Was it 26th?
Is the
I don't know.
27th. Yes, 27th.
Yeah. I don't know why I offered an opinion because I don't know anything about dates or times. I am the last person to figure those out.
So 5:30 on the 27th. The tweet that the Big Ten put out on Tuesday, yesterday about this, did not mention that it would be a part of anything on the Big Ten Network. I would be shocked if a Big Ten Network show was not run alongside of this announcement. I think you would be as well, T. Frank. So yeah. I would expect that we'll be seeing this released live on BTN. In terms of any other details, I think before we get into some of the other stuff, important to note that this announcement, at least in the past, has not included any dates, anything but dates. So no times typically associated with this, nor TV windows. Could we see some? Yes, I do think it's possible if we see maybe some homecoming dates given assignments, or maybe one or two marquee primetime games given their assignments. But by and large, I would still expect that you'll see that like Memorial Day release of some more information. But at the very least, T. Frank, we will be able to discuss where Penn State is going when you'll be going to Beaver Stadium in 2026, which a lot of fans have been waiting for endlessly. Since the middle of the 2025 season, but certainly since that season ended.
Yeah, and some of the key road dates, I think that there's some interesting road teams that fans might want to see. So knowing when that is also, going to, I'll just say it out loud. Everyone, I think, would like to go to Washington if they can. It's a new spot. It's a new experience, and one that a lot of people have said is an awesome experience as well. So knowing when those things are happening, I think is an important thing. And then getting into like the home games, the dates and where they stack up is also a big part of the conversation about how the schedule's personality is going to play out, right? Do you have a month on the road like Penn State had this past offseason in October and then into November? Do you have if you do have a brutal stretch of games, it would be like you have Minnesota, and then you have at Washington, at Michigan, or however it stacks up to say, okay, here's the meat grinder section of the schedule that Penn State normally has, and it doesn't include Ohio State and it doesn't include Oregon. So there's a little bit of relief here, and I know fans are looking at this as it's very easy schedule. I'll put it up here again for everyone to see. On the YouTube channel. I'll just read it off for everyone who is listening on the podcast and doesn't know the schedule, because I wouldn't know the schedule unless I had to put it up here on the screen here. So home games are Minnesota, Purdue, Rutgers, USC, Wisconsin. So they got 5 home games and 4 away this year. Maryland, Michigan, Northwestern, and Washington are the away games. What we do know already, Marshall at Temple, and then Buffalo on September 19th. So a late start to the year. September 5th is the opening game of the season instead of the final weekend in August. So those are that's the schedule overall. you have any thoughts before we get into kind of our most interesting and our superlatives about the schedule here, Greg?
Yeah. Oh, I think number one, a lot of Penn State fans are going to be lining up to try and get into the link to see Penn State at Temple, especially those of you that live in the eastern half of the state. So I remember T. Frank going down to Temple the last time Penn State played there. It was 2015 when Hackenberg got sacked 10 times.
Yeah.
And parking was a zoo, my friend, an absolute zoo. I just remember every spot you tried to park in had somebody's cooler or beer pong table or grill, and it was a beautiful day too, and it was just pure chaos in those parking lots. And then for Penn State, it was literally pure chaos on the field, starting with John Reed working out before that game and then being ruled out before it even started. And the least of the Penn State's problems was the cornerbacks room in that contest.
Yeah.
It was the offensive line. So we will see how that all shakes out, but not a daunting non-conference schedule for Penn State. We talked about that previously, T. Frank, that the idea of how we learn more about this Penn State team is going to kind of be, I think, stunted a little bit in the early goings, because it just feels to me like in a lot of ways, most of what you might learn about this team, if you do, it could be bad news in a non-conference slate. If they go and blow these teams out as expected, you're still going to, I think, go into whatever comes after those 3 games with some questions or uncertainties. But if Penn State would not play well in 1 or 2 of them, or somehow lose one of them as a double-digit favorite, you're going to learn a lot of things that the comments of this channel and elsewhere around the internet, including on the Lions Den message board at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com, the comments are not going to be pretty. So,
yeah, that is the thing about the non-conference schedule that I struggle with personally. And like I was wrong about last year, because I still use those non-conference games to say, okay, what are they trying to do? What's the personality? What are the examples of what they're trying to accomplish, scheme-wise? So for me, I feel like there's things I can learn. It's not, are you good or not? It's, what are you trying to be? And this past non-conference season, believing when people said, hey, we're still working on stuff and we're trying to get things going, like, I thought we would see a different offense when they hit the conference season, and we didn't. And maybe here's the thing is, maybe we were going to, but they never were in enough of a rhythm to get plays that it actually turned into an offense of any kind whatsoever. Like, it was just the narrative of Penn State's offense in the first 6 games was it was unbelievably disjointed with absolutely no chemistry, and that was the personality of the offense. What they wanted to be, I still don't know. Because I do think they were trying to work on the passing game. They were trying to get those receivers chemistry with the quarterback, which, by the way, in retrospect, it's a huge red flag that you didn't get that chemistry with those receivers in the offseason when you had them, considering only Trevor Pena was the guy that added in late. And so I'm going to be more careful this year, but at the same time, like, it's a completely new offense and defense. So I'm going to get at least some early tells of who's playing what positions, how does this defense interact with the front and the secondary, and then the offense. Like, I think we know more of what they want to be on offense than defense, but still, like, getting those confirmations for me in the first 3 games is always important. It's just not taking away the wrong thing unless it is, in fact, that, oh no, they're bad. They're bad on offense. And that was the thing that we were like, is it, or is it something different? And again, not trying to re-adjudicate 2025 or bring up those things again, but that's the danger of these non-conference games is even when it is bad, there's always something that can muddy the water. There's always something or somebody could say to be like, yeah, that's not who we are. So, taking all of that with a grain of salt.
Well, T. Frank, speaking of muddy waters, buddy, when we get done with this and you get to go take a look at the Buffalo Bills current news conference going on in Orchard Park,
not happy.
It is it is a bit of a mess. I was just looking on Twitter for something else related to this conversation and came across some clips from that, and oh boy, that's a little bit dicey. Okay, so Penn State will obviously have a number of home games in Big Ten play. It also goes on the road for a handful of games. Let's start with the obvious question that Penn State fans are going to want to know after next week's announcement of the schedule. Again, next Tuesday, the 27th. We appreciate the Big Ten doing this, T. Frank. That makes next Wednesday's rundown decisions pretty easy, buddy. There's not going to be a whole lot of thought required for next Wednesday's show. It's going to be, okay, let's react to this schedule. So obviously one of the things we'll be talking about, whether Penn State announces it right away or not, is who the whiteout opponent would be. I mean, obviously the no-brainer pick here on this home schedule, which is not all that enticing on paper at least, would be USC. And that game would, of course, if that game is at night, it is a no-brainer. If it's at 3:30, it's probably still a no-brainer, certainly depending on what time of the year it is. If it's at noon, Penn State's going to have to do some thinking on that. But this home schedule, T. Frank, when you look at it, Rutgers, Purdue, Minnesota, USC, and Wisconsin. I could maybe make the case for I don't know. Like, I think the issue here is
it's hard to make a case for any of the other teams, right?
When you look at those opponents on paper, there's one case to make for the whiteout, and there's maybe four to make for homecoming. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So to me, it really is USC or bust. And I would think anyway. I don't know for sure. And
in a previous generation, Wisconsin would have made some sense. Like if you wanted another team that you feel like you could get a win against and would be a draw nationally, and is just like on that level of respectable Big Ten team that can beat Penn State. It might not be like Wisconsin would be the team, but like what are they anymore? I have no idea what Wisconsin is anymore.
I don't think they know at this point, and they just dropped season ticket prices. I didn't read the reason why because I really don't care what the reason why. I'm assuming it's because people aren't buying them because they also don't know what they're going to watch, and then thus don't want to pay for it. So, USC a no-brainer. I mean, you would assume, I think, or at least you'd like to assume that USC coming across the country would be playing at night. When you combine that with the whiteout experience, obviously for television partners and for fans. But TV obviously makes these final calls, as we well know. You get D'Anton Lynn going against his former team. It just has the makings of a primetime tilt. You could also argue, of course, that would make it all very compelling to Fox and Big Noon, which is why these dates are so important to have. Because even if we don't get all the info, we can certainly start piecing together some thoughts on, what games might make sense this week for Big Noon versus the 3:30 midday package on CBS versus your primetime slot on NBC, which is usually how those three share their picks. So, I just think no matter what time that USC game is, that or, maybe Minnesota, you can make an argument for. But
so do you think, okay, let's kind of go through this. Michigan makes sense as a Big Noon game, right? I wonder how much Fox wants Penn State when they're not up against Ohio State, right? Like a lot of the Big Noon games had to do with either Penn State being good or Penn State being against a team that they wanted on TV. And I know Penn State's a huge TV draw, so I'm not trying to dismiss that, but with as few interesting home games as there are, and the obvious one being the on the road against Michigan, would they want USC? Would they prioritize that game as a Big Noon kick, or would they be like, okay, that's like a sixth choice for us. We'd rather have NBC have that, and then it can be a primetime game and be a primetime whiteout. Like, I guess that's the other thing I'm looking at of like, what are the juicy matchups Fox would want, and would they prioritize Penn State against a non-traditional team to put at Big Noon?
Yeah, and to me, it just. Again, if it comes down to it and Fox has the first pick on a certain or that particular week and they want that game, they're going to get it. So I would just still be very surprised if that's not your whiteout ultimately in 2026. All right. Most interesting game overall. We're going to kick USC out of this conversation because I think we can all agree that most of the categories we're going to discuss here and hope you share with your thoughts with us in the chat about, you could pick USC for. And so USC, as you just heard us discuss, was a runaway, obvious lock for the whiteout one. So we're going to go a different direction here. T. Frank, lead us off. What is the most interesting game in your mind on this schedule besides the Lions clash with USC?
The one you picked, but I'll go with Penn State at Washington because I think that one is a new thing. Washington is a volatile good team. You know, the situation with their quarterback this offseason trying to transfer, all the things going on with Washington as a team trying to make a relevant impact in the Big Ten. And it's a measuring stick from the difficulty standpoint. I have no idea how Matt Campbell is going to handle West Coast travel and if he's going to make as big of a deal about it as James Franklin did. As a team that played in the Central Time Zone, I don't know if he thinks about it. So there's a couple of things here on the list of what we're going to learn about the institution under Matt Campbell when it comes to that Penn State at Washington game. Also matters where in the year it is. So is it an end of the season game when it's going to be in the 40s and rainy, or is it going to be an early season game where they're going out and it's nice out in the Pacific Northwest? So to me, the variability around Washington, that's what I think is most interesting.
I think you hit the nail on the head right there, quite honestly, because I think Penn State fans have wanted this Big Ten schedule for so long, T. Frank, because they want to book this trip. And as soon as they know, they feel like they can get the best flight, the best hotel options. They're excited to go to Seattle and see Penn State play out there for the first time. And I get it. I think we all will very much look forward to that. And to your point, yeah, we are going to learn some things about how Matt Campbell wants to handle this stuff now that he's coaching an East Coast team. So we'll see how that all shakes out. I'm with you. That game really is a tie to me between that, again, kicking USC out of this conversation, and the Michigan game. Penn State also goes to the Big House this year. Michigan has a new coach. It will have the same quarterback in Bryce Underwood. I don't want to get too far into the weeds here in terms of what Michigan is going to be this year, because I just haven't had enough time to go actually look at them and what Kyle Whittingham is bringing with him from Utah and other parts of the portal versus what they lose, and the turnover with Sharon Moore leaving. Obviously, I don't have enough time to dig into that just yet. But, I mean, it's obvious, right? Penn State, Michigan, even in years when these two teams maybe aren't as projected to be as good as past years, this is always a big game to watch. I'm sure the Big House will be packed. And, again, when that game is interesting, too. Do you have to deal with a new-look Michigan team who's not on the level of Oregon last year? But, if you had that first September Big Ten game, whenever you get it, if you get it, which I'm assuming they will, because I believe there are not enough Saturdays in September to buy your way out of it. Let me look real quick, T. Frank. This is horrible podcasting.
I got you. There are 4 Saturdays in September.
Okay,
5,
so
12,
in
19,
theory,
26.
So in theory, that last Saturday of September could be a bye week for Penn State, or they could roll right into the non-conference portion out of the non-conference portion of their schedule and face a Big Ten foe. Looking at this list, you certainly, I think, would prefer a couple other teams on it than a trip to Michigan to kick things off at the end of September, regardless of who you play in the non-con. So when that game will be another fascinating thing to consider as well.
Yeah, and I don't know. It's always the question of, I do believe the matchups and the TV value play a part in this. Like some of the best games are saved for October and November. And there aren't enough good teams on the schedule this year for Penn State to burn one the final Saturday in September, like we saw with Oregon this past year. Because there were other big matchups late in the year for Penn State. So I agree with you. I think they're going to start, with one of the other conversation pieces here, maybe at Northwestern or a home game against Purdue, because that might lead into one of the other things we're talking about here.
Yeah, so let's go then to the biggest non-USC home game. Obviously, this is not, as we mentioned previously, a tremendous on-paper home schedule for Penn State. We can combo biggest non-USC home game and probably the homecoming part of this conversation, because they seem to likely maybe not go hand in hand, whatever. Biggest non-USC home game for Penn State. A reminder that the home opponents for this year are Wisconsin, USC.
I got you.
Not what I want my computer to do. Rutgers, Purdue, and Minnesota. Where do you land looking at that list? Kicking out USC again.
Yeah.
This 2026 Penn State schedule.
For it really depends. The Minnesota's consistency, we know what they are. They are going to be a middle of the pack Big Ten team that's going to be a difficult out. So to me, that's the biggest non-USC home game, with the understanding that I don't expect anything of Wisconsin, but just the brand value there makes that a second on the conversation. But I don't think Rutgers is getting any better. I don't think Purdue's going to get it better in time for this to be a quality matchup. So really it comes down to the only answer here is Minnesota.
Yeah, I think you're right. The only point I would make here is that what we are going to learn early on with this schedule, Penn State should be, in my mind, favored in every game on this 2026 schedule, except for at Michigan probably, and maybe I can't see him being an underdog to USC at home in a whiteout. At least not initially. At least not initially, as obviously whenever that game is and as the season goes on. But if that game is at home in a whiteout for Penn State, can't see him being an underdog to USC on paper. So they might only be not favored in one game this year, and that's at Michigan. Obviously, at Washington's possibility as well. But, I mean, I just think that it's a really interesting schedule, and what it's going to teach us is that can Matt Campbell beat these teams he's supposed to beat. And then he's beaten at, more often than not at Iowa State, but sometimes he was the team that other teams should be beating at Iowa State. And so, can he knock out the teams he's supposed to knock out? We're going to learn that because there's going to be a lot of them that Penn State should knock out in theory, at least on paper, on January 21st in 2026 by the time the season rolls around. So that's my main takeaway with that home schedule. And then hardest road test. There's not really, flip a coin. Is it at Michigan or is it at Washington? Too early to.
I like that we flip flopped on this one. So you have at Washington. What are your reasons for at Washington?
You kind of hit the nail on the head earlier, but it is going to be the West Coast trip for Matt Campbell and this team. And we know all the stats about teams traveling multiple time zones and how it usually doesn't go well for them and blah, blah, blah. So we knew kind of what to expect under the 2025 and 2024 operations with James Franklin. And there's no reason to think that Matt Campbell won't have a similar, if not superior plan, but we just don't know what it is, right? So until you see it in action, it just, it's one thing to load the guys up and fly to Detroit and, go play Michigan, whatever Michigan might be in 2026. That's one thing. It's another thing, and again, whatever Washington might be. So Washington is odds of 200-1 right now at BetMGM. So in theory, at least, or at least on paper at this moment, Michigan's a tougher matchup, but Washington's obviously the trickier trip. And so that is sort of how I fell on that one. And also just so we didn't pick the same teams, quite frankly.
Yeah. And I think the at Michigan game is from a talent perspective and from now a coaching perspective is going to be a harder matchup because Kyle Whittingham is a good coach. It's interesting, because my in-laws have been so how do we get into the Big Ten? And they've been kind of rationalizing that being in the Big 12 is they're okay. But they're like, how do we? And now Kyle Whittingham is the head coach at Michigan, and so having kind of an institutional understanding of what he's been as a coach, he's bringing the Iowa discipline to Michigan, which makes them Michigan of old, right? The Jim Harbaugh level of execution and talent level. So that, to me, from a baseline test of a good football team that's not going to beat itself, that's what they're going to be. And that, their retention from their the transition of their coaches was pretty good. So just a baseline of that. The thing I'm interested in is how, and they're going to put less on Bryce Underwood's plate, I think, as a quarterback than they did previously. Still, for fans that want to know, it was 31-13 USC beats Michigan this past year, and that was, I believe, in Ann Arbor. No, it was out west in LA. So Danton Lynn did a pretty damn good job against Bryce Underwood. So is there an advantage there of can he replicate that with better talent, clearly better talent at Penn State this year? It's going to be an interesting game, but I do think that's the more difficult test because they're not going to be beating themselves, and that whole situation with Sharon Moore, it's going to be a 180, and it's just going to be how quickly can Kyle Whittingham install his culture and his expectations on the program.
Yeah, one thought on that trip for Penn State now going to Washington later this year. Keep in mind, Matt Campbell and his staff had to figure out a way to go play in Ireland to start the 2025 college football season. So if you can figure it out for Ireland, I feel fairly confident you can figure it out for Washington. But certainly, doing that to start the year and you have all the time in the world versus an in-season trip, even if it's less time zones of miles, is certainly a little bit different. So, all right. Well, the 2026 Big Ten schedule comes out next Tuesday, January 27th. We're going to get out of here a little bit early today, folks. I apologize for that. That's on me. But, T. Frank, some final thoughts as we wrap up this Wednesday edition of BWI Live. I feel like the last 55 minutes have flown by in the exact opposite way that the wait for the Big Ten schedule has.
So one of the things I'm working on this week is, at least over at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com, people have been asking me repeatedly about what do we know about Penn State's new strength coach, Reed Kagi. So I have been doing some sleuthing, trying to learn more about him, and I'm going to be writing about that this week.
I cannot wait to read that, T. Frank, because it is a question that I have seen on the message. Like that and when's the schedule coming out have been the two things that have been dominant questions over on the Lions Den message board the last couple of days. And I am very fascinated to see what you find, because I think there's also been this, and I think you answered the question this morning. Maybe it was last night. See, that's the other thing. If you're a subscriber, join for $1 and you can get access to us at all times of the day and night. There's like this poo-pooing of the job Chuck Losey and his crew did, and I don't really understand that, other than they're not here anymore. So all the problems are just obviously attached to the people who left, and that's that.
It started before then, and I think that there is this perception that Penn State was soft, especially on offense. And so when the offense, when that is soft and you can't directly correlate run game mentality and bullying the other team, you stop looking. It can't be just the head coach. You've got to start blaming other people. And the strength coach is supposed to be the guy that installs the grit in these people. And like, I don't know, man. I've gone through multiple times of talking about, like, from a scientific perspective, what is the strength coach's job? And what is his job within the context of what the head coach is setting out? And people are just like, yeah, I don't care. And so, like, you can give people information, and if they don't want to listen to you of like the facts you've learned, and like I have asked experts about strength coaching and people who have degrees in this, and then you go, here's the information, here's the stuff, and they go, yeah, but like, I don't, like, they didn't run for enough yardage, or whatever the metric is that you think of, like, is toughness, then, like, I can't help you, because what you're looking at is not the actual metric of how you gauge a strength coach. So we'll see if people believe me when I write about it, but, you know, that's to be determined.
All right, last one. Then we got to roll. Question in the chat. Any idea when Penn State fans will get to hear from Matt Campbell? Another popular question this week and recently at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. My anticipation at this point would be that you are not going to hear from him until the traditional National Signing Day on the first Wednesday in February. Why? Because they're trying to fit as much recruiting travel and visits as possible into these final 2 weeks of January before a February dead period arrives that will keep them in state college and give them no opportunity to host prospects or go see them. So why I don't think Penn State fans, as much as they want to hear from Matt Campbell, I think they'd also be pretty mad, T. Frank, if he took time away from program building to talk to us.
Yeah, for sure.
So, all right. Well, that'll do it for today's BWI Live. I'm Greg Pickle. That's Thomas Frank Carr. He'll be back anyway tomorrow with the BWI Live Recruiting Show with Sean Fitz and Ryan Snyder. And if you join us for $1, we never leave. We're always at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com, both on the homepage and the Lions Den message board. So check us out there, BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. For T. Frank, I'm Greg Pickle. We'll catch you next time on BWI Live.